To my two beautiful souls, at MR and at Sona Growing Heart, thank you from the depths of my heart for your unwavering support on Buy Me a Coffee. Your kindness and generosity really helps me create more exciting stories for you all. As we step into the 6th episode of Taehyung and Rue's whirlwind journey, the stakes are higher and the passion is hotter. The real story begins. Have we met before?
Appa.
Jungkook's voice trembled as he struggled to sit up, his eyes fixed on the gun in his father's hand. Jeon's face contorted in a mixture of rage and revulsion. You're one of them, aren't you? Jeon spat, venom dripping from his words. A homosexual? Jungkook's hands shook violently as he grasped for his clothes, hastily throwing them on to cover himself. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and terrified. Appa, Jungkook began, his words barely above a whisper. He knew he couldn't defend himself, not after his father had walked in on him and Tae in such an intimate position. The memory of their bodies entwined, their love and passion for each other on full display, flashed through Jungkook's mind. He felt a wave of shame wash over him, followed by a surge of fear. What would his father do to him? To Taehyung? But Jeon's voice rose to a deafening crescendo. Are you a gay? Answer me. Taehyung's eyes fluttered open, disoriented from the sudden shout. He sat up with a jolt, his gaze drifting lazily to Jeon's twisted face. For a moment, he just stared, his mind struggling to process the scene unfolding before him. His eyes slowly traveled to Jungkook, who was sliding out of bed, his face pale and terrified. Taehyung's gaze lingered on Jungkook's frightened expression, and his eyes softened. Without thinking, he reached out and subtly brushed his fingers against Jungkook's arm, a gentle touch that spoke volumes of comfort and reassurance. Jungkook's movements were slow and labored as he edged away from the bed, his eyes never leaving his father's angry face. When Jeon pressed the gun against his forehead, Taehyung sprang into action, inserting himself between Jeon and Jungkook. What's gotten into you, Mr. Jeon? You're as mad as a cut snake. Taehyung's voice thundered, his face darkening with anger. Jeon's eyes narrowed, his gaze raking over Taehyung. How dare you do this to my son? He snarled, his voice dripping with malice. Taehyung's eyes locked onto Jungkook's, his expression softening. I'm not doing anything to him, Mr. Jeon. He's an adult, and he can make his own choices. As Taehyung stood face-to-face with Mr. Jeon, their eyes locked in a tense stare. The older man's face paled, his eyes widening in recognition as he took in Taehyung's familiar features. Taehyung Nathaniel, he stammered, his mind racing with the implications. Recognition dawned, followed by a flurry of questions. Had Jungkook already known this Australian? Were they in a relationship, even back then? Was this the reason Jungkook had broken off his engagement? Mr. Jeon's gaze turned inward, his thoughts consumed by the possibilities. His son, his precious Jungkook, had chosen this man. An Australian, with no connection to their culture or traditions, and a man. A mix of emotions swirled across Mr. Jeon's face, shock, disgust, and a deep-seated anger. His eyes refocused on Taehyung, his expression twisting in contempt. Taehyung's voice cut through the silence, his tone calm and collected. Taehyung Nathaniel, we met. You didn't exactly the role. Out the welcome mat for me, if I recall. Mr. Jeon's face darkened, his eyes flashing with indignation. You're the one, he spat, his voice low and venomous. You're the reason my son threw away his future. Jungkook stepped forward, his eyes locked on his father's. Appa, please try to understand. But Mr. Jeon cut him off, his voice escalating to a furious crescendo. I refuse to understand. You're my son, and you'll do as I say. His face contorted in revulsion. Mr. Jeon spat out the words. You're sacrificing your entire future for this abomination. Jungkook's eyes flashed with defiance. I'm not throwing away anything, Appa.
I'm
choosing to be happy. Jeon's voice rose. Happy? You call this happy? You're betraying everything we stand for. Taehyung's eyes softened as he watched Jungkook struggle, and his mind drifted back to the intimate moment they shared just a while ago. Flashback. Bathed in Jungkook's warmth, Taehyung's gaze met Jungkook's shining eyes. For a moment, he was lost in their depths, his heart skipping a beat. His eyes wandered to Jungkook's lips, slightly parted with a gentle smile. Taehyung's eyelids fluttered, drinking in the sight. Jungkook's front teeth, slightly protruding, added to his endearing smile. Taehyung's gaze returned to Jungkook's eyes, and he whispered, "Rue." Jungkook's voice was barely audible, but his words sent shivers down Taehyung's spine. "I'm in love, Taeny. I feel so much for you." The tender moment was shattered by Mr. Jeon's thunderous voice, echoing through the room. "Gay? You're telling me my son is gay? It's disgusting, Jungkook. Unacceptable." Taehyung's gaze snapped back to the present, his eyes locking onto Mr. Jeon's furious face. Taehyung's eyes flashed with anger, his jaw set in determination. "You're not hearing him, Mr. Jeon. Jungkook is trying to tell you that he's found someone he cares deeply about." Jeon's face turned beet red with fury. "Love? You dare to call this love? You're a poison, corrupting my son's mind and soul." Jungkook's voice trembled with emotion. "Appa, please, try to see it from my perspective. I won't apologize for what I'm." Jeon's face twisted in disgust. "You're broken, and I'm going to fix you. You need treatment, counseling, something to cure you of this sickness." Jungkook's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not sick, Appa. I'm just different. And I won't let you, or anyone else shame me for who I am. How dare you? You ungrateful, disobedient child." Jeon's face twisted in a mixture of rage and disgust as he raised the back of his gun, slapping Jungkook across the cheek with a sickening crack. The sound echoed through the room like a crack of thunder, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Jungkook's head snapped back, his forehead bleeding as he stumbled into the chair, his eyes wide with shock and pain. "Rue, babe, please tell me you're okay."
I'm
"Going out of my mind here." Taehyung's voice trembled with concern as he rushed to Jungkook's side, cradling his injured face in his hands. Jungkook's eyes remained fixed on his father, a mixture of shock and pain etched on his face. Taehyung's gaze snapped to Jeon, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're a monster," he spat, his voice venomous. "He's bleeding because of you." Jeon's face reddened, his fists clenched. "He's my son," he thundered. "I'll stop at nothing to protect him from your corrupting influence." Taehyung's eyes flashed with warning. "Take one more step, Mr. Jeon, and I swear I'll make sure you never harm him again," he growled, his voice low and deadly. Jeon sneered, yanking Jungkook up by his collar. Taehyung sprang into action, pinning Jeon against the wall with a grip like steel. "I warned you," Taehyung hissed, eyes blazing. "Don't
take
another step." Jungkook stumbled forward, eyes wide with fear. "Taeny, stop. He's my father." Taehyung's grip faltered, and Jeon seized the chance.
He
wrestled free, eyes wild with rage, and drew the gun, eyes blazed with fury as he aimed the gun squarely at Taehyung. "You're the one who's corrupted my son," he spat, his voice venomous. "You're the one who's turned him against me." Before Jungkook could even process what was happening, Jeon pulled the trigger.
The
gun fired, and Taehyung's body jerked backward, a look of shock frozen on his face. Jungkook's eyes widened in horror as he watched Taehyung crumple to the ground. "And no, Appa, what have you done?" he stuttered, his voice shaking with shock and grief. Jeon's face turned ashen as he stared at Taehyung's bleeding form, his eyes wide with a mix of horror and satisfaction. He stumbled backward, his mind reeling with the weight of his actions. "I had to do it," he muttered to himself, trying to justify the unthinkable. "I had to save my son." But the fear began to creep in, gnawing at his conscience. He had shot a foreigner, a man with connections and influence. The repercussions would be severe. Jungkook held Taehyung close, his tears falling onto Taehyung's pale face like rain. "Appa, what have you done?" he screamed, his voice cracking with despair.
Danye. Tanya.
Hey, Jungkook whispered, his voice trembling with anguish. Don't leave me, please. I love you. As Jungkook held him close, Taehyung's eyes fluttered open, a faint smile on his lips. Hey Rue, my bloke, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Jungkook's tears flowed uncontrollably as he held Taehyung's limp body.
Tanya, no.
Please don't leave me, he begged. Taehyung's gaze locked onto Jungkook's, his eyes filled with love and adoration. Love you, Rue, always, he whispered, his voice fading away. As Jungkook's screams echoed through the room, Taehyung's body went numb, his eyes closing as he slipped into unconsciousness. Jungkook's hands trembled as he signed the hospital form, his eyes brimming with tears. The doctor's voice was a distant hum, but Jungkook caught the words, "Keep this matter covered," and international news. As the doctor walked away, Jungkook collapsed onto the bench outside Taehyung's hospital room, his body racked with sobs.
Tanya.
He whispered, his voice cracking with despair. Mr. Jeon grasped the doctor's arm, his voice low and urgent. Will he survive? He asked, his eyes darting with anxiety. The doctor's expression turned cold, his voice laced with disdain. What do you want, sir? Do you want to risk drawing an international incident? Taehyung is a member of a prominent family from his country. We can't afford to have this situation blown out of proportion. John's face twisted in a scowl. I just want him out of my way, he spat. And I'm willing to give you anything in return. Money, influence, whatever you want. The doctor stared at John, his face a mask of disbelief. You're unbelievable, he whispered, his voice trembling with disgust. Listen, Mr. John, I advise you to contact Taehyung's family immediately and try to settle this matter privately. If this gets out, it will blow up into a diplomatic incident, and that's not good for your company, our country, or anyone involved. John's eyes narrowed, but the doctor continued, his voice firm. You need to take responsibility for your actions and try to make this right. Contact his family, apologize, and offer compensation. That's the only way to contain this situation. Jungkook's fingers clenched around Taehyung's phone, which was still ringing in his hand. The screen flashed with the name Alex. With a trembling finger, Jungkook swiped to answer. Hello. Jungkook stuttered, his voice barely audible. Nate, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days. A voice said on the other end of the line. Jungkook's eyes welled up with tears. Alex, I'm Taehyung's friend, please you have to come. Taehyung is in the hospital. There was a pause on the other end of the
line. What?
Where is he? Who are you? Alex demanded. Jungkook's voice cracked. Seoul, I'll share the details, please ask his grandfather to come immediately. Jungkook disconnected the call, leaving Alex stunned and worried on the other end of the line. Day, Alex. You look like you've seen a ghost, Reginald said, not looking up from his laptop. The office room was silent, except for the sound of Reginald's fingers flying across the keyboard. Alex stepped inside, his heart racing. He knew he had to break the news to Reginald, but he was dreading it. Taehyung was Reginald's only grandson, his flesh and blood. Alex, what's going on, love? You're starting to worry me, Reginald said, finally looking up. His eyes pierced through Alex, making him gulp. Reg, I've booked a flight. We need to leave pronto, Alex said, trying to sound calm. Reginald chuckled. Alex? Didn't I tell you to stop planning surprises like that? You're gonna give me a heart attack one of these days. Alex took a deep breath and stepped closer. Nate's in hospital, Reg. Reginald's face shifted in an instant. What in the blazes happened to him? He growled. Alex hesitated before answering. He's in Seoul, Reg. And it looks like he's in a bit of trouble. Reginald's eyes flashed with anger, and he rose from his chair like a tiger from its den. Alex flinched slightly, intimidated by the man's aura. As Reginald stormed out of the cabin, his heavy footsteps thundered through the room, shaking the foundations. Alex watched transfixed, the man vanished into the distance. Alex watched, his eyes widening in awe. It was no wonder Taehyung possessed such an formidable aura. It was a trait inherited directly from his grandfather. Whenever Alex gazed at Taehyung, he felt as though he was catching a glimpse of Reginald's youth, the era he had never witnessed. There was something mesmerizing about Taehyung, something that drew Alex in, making him crave more.
It was an
attraction that went beyond the physical, a connection that stirred the depths of his soul. Jungkook sat staring blankly at the door, his eyes welling up with tears once more.
He
Slowly rose from his chair, his legs heavy with regret. Why did I meet him? He whispered to himself, his voice cracking. Why did I let him in? He thought of all the what-ifs, his mind racing with the possibilities. I should have resisted my feelings. I should have lied to myself, to everyone. I should have focused on my life, ignored my desires. Jungkook's had spun with regrets, his heart aching with sorrow. Tainy, I'm so sorry, he muttered, leaning against the wall. Please get well soon. Just then, a nurse rushed in, looking frantic. Jungkook, please, you need to do something. Your father, he's not thinking clearly. I overheard him talking to the doctor. Jungkook's eyes flashed with anger as he sprinted through the corridors, bursting into the doctor's room. His father stood inside, his expression unreadable. You're not going to harm him, Appa. Jungkook warned, his voice low and menacing. You're not going to touch Tainy. He's Reginald Nathaniel's grandson, an Australian citizen. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about our country's reputation. Jungkook grasped his father's shoulders, his eyes blazing with determination. If you harm Tainy, you'll lose me too, Appa. I swear it. The doctor slipped out of the room, looking
relieved.
Jungkook's father remained expressionless, but Jungkook could see the calculation in his eyes. I'm done, Appa, Jungkook whispered, his voice cracking. Please, just leave Tainy alone. I'm begging you. Jungkook collapsed onto a nearby chair, his body shaking with emotion, as his father stood before him, his expression unyielding. Time skipped forward, and Alex placed a calming hand on Reginald's arm. Reg, let me call the guy. Reginald's growl was low and menacing, his frustration simmering just below the surface as he stood tall, his eyes blazing with intensity. Alex dialed the number, his eyes scanning the area until he spotted Jungkook standing frozen at the entrance. Hey, Jungkook. Alex called out, his voice calm and soothing. Jungkook's eyes darted to Alex, then back to Reginald, his fear palpable. Then his eyes darted around the room, taking in the imposing figures surrounding Reginald, the medical team, the guards, and the officials. The sheer force of Reginald's entourage was daunting, a testament to the man's power and influence. As soon as Jungkook nodded, Reginald's head snapped towards him, his eye narrowing. In a swift and deadly movement, Reginald grabbed Jungkook by the collar, his grip like a vice. Where is my grandson? Reginald spat, his voice low and menacing. What have you done to him? Jungkook's eyes went wide, his face pale, as he stuttered out a reply. Cheese. Alex intervened, placing a calming hand on Reginald's arm. Reg, leave him. First, let's see our Nate. Reginald's eyes bore into Jungkook's, his gaze lingering for a moment before he released his grip and followed Alex, his entourage of officials, guards, and medical staff trailing behind. Alex glanced at the doctor, a mix of anxiety and determination in his eyes. Can we see Nate? The doctor, visibly shaken by the intensity of the situation, gave a hesitant nod as Reginald shot a stern look his way before pushing the door open. Jungkook watched as Reginald entered the room, followed closely by Alex and the team of doctors. The doctor remained rooted to the entrance, unsure of his place. Reginald's gaze softened briefly as he glanced at his unconscious grandson lying on the bed. Alex stepped closer, his voice tender. Oh, Nate, he murmured, gently caressing Tae's forehead. Reginald's eyes trailed over Tae's figure, his expression hardening once more.
Check his.
Condition thoroughly, he commanded the team, his tone brooking no argument. I want every detail, and I want him sound and fine. Without waiting for a response, Reginald turned and walked out of the room, leaving the team to their work. As Reginald stepped out of the room, Jungkook's head snapped towards him, his eyes locking onto the older man's imposing figure. Reginald's voice was firm as he commanded, "You come with me." Jungkook nodded, his heart racing, as he followed Reginald to a nearby room. Inside, Jeon sat. Reginald dragged a chair across the floor, the sound echoing through the room, and sat across from Jeon. His eyes narrowed, his voice low and menacing. "Do you have any idea whom you've harmed?" Reginald asked, his calmness sending ankle down Jungkook's spine. "He is Taehyung Nathaniel, my one and only heir. He is my blood, my everything." Jeon sneered. "And do you know what your grandson has done?" I'm disgusted too. Even. Reginald's eyebrow rose, his gaze shifting to Jungkook, who stuttered. "He came to meet me. We both are." Jungkook's voice trailed off, his eyes wide with fear. Reginald's laughter was sudden and crazed, shocking both Jeon and Jungkook. "So, you're saying you shot him because he slept with your son?" Reginald's tone was incredulous. "What a joke. What a joke." Jeon's face reddened. "It's no joke for me.
I
won't let my son fall into his trap." Reginald's expression turned glacial, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Shuya, I don't care about your son's preferences or what you want. I only care
about my boy.
If anything happens to him, I'll make sure your entire government pays the price." The doctor burst into the room, a look of relief on his face. "Sir, Taehyung is awake." Jungkook let out a sigh, his eyes welling up with tears as he rushed out of the room. Reginald stood up, his eyes closing in relief. As he took a deep breath, Alex's face lit up with a warm smile as he leaned in, his hand caressing Taehyung's forehead and face. Taehyung's eyes slowly fluttered open, and he winced, his hand instinctively reaching up to grasp Alex's. "What are you doing here?" Taehyung's voice was weak, but his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "And where am I?" Alex's smile faltered for a moment before he replied. "Nate, you're at the hospital. What's going
on?"
"Reginald is here. Someone called us." Taehyung's eyes widened and he muttered, Granddad here." The door swung open and Reginald stepped inside, his presence commanding attention. Alex stood up, making his way to Reginald, while Taehyung turned his head away, his eyes avoiding his grandfather's gaze. Reginald's voice was firm. "If you're fine, we're leaving soon, Taehyung rolled his eyes, a hint of defiance in his expression. Reginald turned to leave, his eyes expecting obedience. "Alex, arrange our travel back," Reginald
ordered.
Alex nodded, his eyes meeting Taehyung's for a brief moment before he followed Reginald out of the room. As soon as they left, Jungkook dashed inside, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Taehyung, who lay on the bed, looking pale but determined. Jungkook's face reflected exhaustion and worry. He swiped his hand over his face, letting out a deep sigh of relief. He inched towards Taehyung, Tae's tired eyes sparkled with a hint of a smile, and he lifted his hand, reaching out to Jungkook. Jungkook's eyes met Taehyung's, and he felt a surge of emotion. He quickly made his way to the bed, taking Taehyung's hand in his. Taehyung's grip was weak but insistent. He tugged on Jungkook's hand, pulling him closer. Jungkook lost his balance, falling forward onto the bed. Taehyung's eyes sparkled with amusement as he wrapped his arms around Jungkook, holding him close. "Panicked bloke," Taehyung teased, his breath sending shivers down Jungkook's spine. Jungkook's lips trembled as he nodded, his forehead bumping against Taehyung's. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, and he whispered, "You have no idea what I was going through, Tae." Taehyung's eyes softened, and he pushed himself up, his lips seeking Jungkook's. Jungkook backed away, his eyes locked on Taehyung's.
Danya.
Jungkook's voice was husky, his desire palpable. Give me those lips, my throat is going dry. Taehyung breathed out. Jungkook's resolve crumbled and he leaned in, his lips meeting Taehyung's in a tender, yet passionate kiss. Taehyung's lips were like a flame, igniting Jungkook's desire. Jungkook pulled away, his face burying in Taehyung's neck, trailing kisses along his skin. Taehyung squirmed his body, responding to Jungkook's touch. Tae, are you okay? Jungkook whispered, his lips still pressed against Taehyung's skin. Taehyung chuckled softly. I'm not sure. I'm worried, babe. Every time I think of you, I get hard. And now I don't even feel it. Should I be worried? Jungkook's laughter was low and husky. It's because you're sedated, Tae. Their fingers intertwined, and they gazed into each other's eyes, the world around them melting away. Come closer, Taehyung whispered, his eyes sparkling with desire. How much closer? Jungkook teased, his face already brushing against Taehyung's. Taehyung's lips curled into a smile, and he tried to capture Jungkook's lips once more. Closer, like I lose all sense of reality and only see you, Taehyung whispered, his breath dancing across Jungkook's skin. His lips grazed Jungkook's. He nibbled on Jungkook's lips, his tongue tracing the outline of Jungkook's mouth. Jungkook's eyes fluttered closed, his senses overwhelmed by Taehyung's touch. Only you, Taehyung whispered again, his voice husky with need. I want to drown in your eyes, to feel your skin against mine. His hands roamed over Jungkook's body, sending sparks flying through his veins. Jungkook's breathing quickened, his heart racing with desire. He was lost in Taehyung's touch, his senses consumed by the man he loved. Just as their lips were about to meet, Reginald walked in, clearing his throat to announce his presence. Jungkook quickly backed away, but Taehyung held tight to his wrist, refusing to let him go. Reginald's voice was laced with disdain as he spoke. So, you came for this guy? Didn't you find anyone in our own country that you had to cross borders and take a bullet to the stomach? Reginald's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing. Taehyung's response was laced with sarcasm. You probably wanted me to take it to the chest, right? Jungkook's eyes darted worriedly between Taehyung and Reginald. Reginald's laughter was cold. What a joke, Taehyung. You chose a guy from a homophobic society. But that's not my concern. Everything is ready, and we'll be leaving soon. Jungkook's hand clenched around Taehyung's grip, tightening as he sensed the tension escalating. Taehyung's eyes met Jungkook's, a silent understanding passing between them. Jeon stormed into the room, his face thunderous. Jungkook, you're coming with me home. Leave everything here, including the memories with this guy. His eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with disdain. And I'm arranging your marriage to Minji, your childhood friend. Jungkook's eyes widened in horror, his face pale.
Appa.
Have you lost your mind? She's my friend, Appa. Just a friend. His voice shook, his hands trembling. Jeon's expression remained unyielding, his eyes glinting with determination. You heard me, Jungkook. His gaze shifted to Taehyung, a warning glinting in their depths. Stay away from my son. Jungkook's face reddened with defiance. You can't force me, Appa.
Why don't you?
Understand? I have no interest in
Jeon's
voice rose, cutting Jungkook off. Jungkook. Taehyung's voice roared through the room, his eyes blazing with anger. He grasped Jungkook's hand, pulling him closer. Hey, back off. His voice was low and menacing, his eyes flashing with warning. Jeon's face twisted in disgust. You, filth. Leave him alone. Reginald's voice cut through the air, cold and menacing. Jeon, no.
You heard me.
Do whatever you want with your son. Marry him off, drag him out, but not a word against my boy. Reginald's eyes flashed with warning. I've decided to let this matter go, but that doesn't mean I'll keep quiet. You've been warned, Jeon. The room fell silent, the tension oppressive. Jeon's grip on Jungkook's hand was like a vice, dragging him forward. You're coming with me, Jungkook. Now, he growled, his eyes blazing with fury. Jungkook yanked his hand free, his eyes flashing with defiance. I won't go anywhere with you, Appa. Not until you accept me for who I am. His voice shook, his chest heaving with emotion. Jeon's face reddened, his voice rising. You're disgusting, Jungkook. This abomination is not my son. Jungkook stood firm, his eyes locked on Jeon's. I'm still your son, Appa. And I deserve your love and acceptance no matter what. Jeon's expression twisted in disgust. I'll never accept this, Jungkook. Jeon spat, his voice venomous. I've arranged for a doctor to fix you. We'll talk. You'll be treated. Taehyung's voice cut through the air, incredulous. Is he kidding? That's insane. Jungkook's eyes blazed with defiance. Never, Appa. I'm fine. Why don't you? Understand? Why can't you just accept me? Jeon's eyes glinted with malice. Really? You're fine? Then choose, Jungkook, your family or this abomination. Your organization or this guy, your country or this guy. Because with this guy in your life, you'll have none of these. I'll never accept this shame. The room fell silent. Jeon's voice dripped with venom. Speak. Jungkook. Choose between your Appa, who will always choose what's best for you, or this guy, who's corrupted you. Choose between the life you knew and the life you're trying to ruin. Jungkook's eyes flashed with anger, his voice steady. You've always chosen what's best for me, Appa, but have you ever stopped to ask if it's what I want? Have you ever asked if I'm happy? No, you've just forced your own desires on me and expected me to conform. Jungkook's voice rose, his words pouring out in a rush. I'm done, Appa. I'm done with being your puppet. I'm done with being ashamed of who I am. I choose to be myself, no matter what you think. Jeon's face twisted in disgust. You're disgusting, Jungkook. You're a disappointment. Just choose the life you knew or the life you're trying to ruin. Choose between being my son or being nothing. I choose to be myself, Appa. And if that means losing everything, then so be it. At least I'll have my dignity. Jeon's smirk was twisted, his eyes glinting with malice. Fine, Jungkook. You can leave the country, the organization, the house. I'll wait until you come crawling back, saying, Appa, I made a mistake. But it will be too late. You'll have lost everything, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. This guy, he spat, pointing at Taehyung, who ruined a marriage for you, can just as easily break you into a million pieces and discard you for someone else. Jungkook, remember these words, sear them into your mind, just remember. With that, Jeon turned and walked out of the room, the door slamming shut behind him. Taehyung's eyes were frozen on Jungkook's, his expression unreadable. Reginald's glare lingered on Taehyung and Jungkook before he turned and exited the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Jungkook let out a deep sigh and leaned against the wall, his eyes closing as he tried to process the emotional turmoil. Taehyung's eyes never left Jungkook's face as he slowly got up from the bed and inched closer. Jungkook's eyes snapped open, his heart racing as Taehyung cornered him against the wall.
Elie down.
You need rest, Jungkook said, his voice low and heavy. Taehyung's gaze burned with intensity, his eyes melting Jungkook's defenses. My Ru chose me, Taehyung whispered, his voice dripping with emotion. Should I not acknowledge it? Jungkook's face flushed with a soft blush, his eyes darting away.
Taehyung's lips curved into a sly smile. Or maybe later. Jungkook's eyes snapped back to Taehyung's, his pupils dilating as Taehyung's lips captured his. The kiss was soft and gentle, but it sent shivers down Jungkook's spine.
Taehyung's hands roamed over Jungkook's body, his fingers tracing the contours of his muscles. Jungkook's breathing quickened, his body responding to Taehyung's touch. Taehyung noticed Jungkook's growing arousal and smiled to himself. Let me ease it, Taehyung whispered, his hands slipping lower. Jungkook's eyes widened, his face flushing with embarrassment. No, not now, Jungkook protested, his voice barely above a whisper. Taehyung's smile grew wider, his eyes glinting with mischief. I can use my hand, Taehyung said, his voice low and husky. Jungkook's eyes locked onto Taehyung's, his body trembling with anticipation. Taehyung's hands moved swiftly, his fingers wrapping around Jungkook's arousal. Jungkook's eyes rolled back, his body shuddering as he came in Taehyung's hands. Taehyung's smile was triumphant, his eyes burning with desire. He quickly zipped Jungkook's pants, then took a tissue and cleaned his own hands, his eyes never leaving Jungkook's face. Jungkook's face was flushed, his eyes avoiding Taehyung's, but a soft smile played on his lips. Taehyung's lips brushed against Jungkook's ear, his voice whisper-soft. You're mine, Rue, and I'll always take care of you. Jungkook's heart skipped a beat, his body still trembling with the aftershocks of his release. The door creaked open and a girl with a small suitcase stepped inside. Her eyes darted between Taehyung and Jungkook, who stood up, his eyes locked on hers. Taehyung leaned against the headrest, his gaze never leaving Jungkook's face. Minji placed the suitcase in front of Jungkook, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. Jungkook's gaze met hers, his expression a mix of pain and resignation. He's really doing it, isn't he? Jungkook said, his voice barely above a whisper. He's cutting me out of his life. Minji's eyes welled up with tears, her voice trembling. It's not just that, Kook, Minji said, her words laced with sorrow. He wants you to leave Korea, to start over somewhere else. Without him. Jungkook's face fell, his eyes dropping to the floor as the weight of his father's rejection settled in. Thank you, Minji, Jungkook said, his voice soft, his eyes still fixed on the floor. Minji's eyes locked onto Jungkook's, her expression a mix of sadness and concern. He turned to Taehyung, his eyes hesitant. Tainy, this is my childhood friend, Minji. We grew up together. Taehyung's smile was warm as he waved at Minji. Minji's eyes locked onto Jungkook's, her expression a mix of sadness and understanding. Be with Appa, Jungkook said, his voice cracking. Don't make him feel alone. Replace me. His eyes welled up with tears as Minji nodded, her own eyes shining with unshed tears. Minji stepped forward, her arms opening wide, and Jungkook hesitated for a moment before she wrapped her arms around him, hugging him tightly. Jungkook's eyes met Taehyung's, his gaze seeking reassurance. He looked a bit hesitant, unsure of how to react. Taehyung's smile was gentle, his eyes encouraging. He raised his hands, making a gentle hug gesture, as if to say, it's okay, go ahead and hug her back. Jungkook's eyes locked onto Taehyung's, and he seemed to relax, his arms slowly wrapping around Minji. In a gentle hug, Minji pulled away, her voice barely audible. Be safe, and don't forget to call me. Jungkook nodded, his eyes still glistening with unshed tears. Minji's gaze drifted to Taehyung, and for a moment they locked eyes, a wealth of unspoken emotions and secrets passing for hers. Taehyung sensed the weight of her unspoken words, and he knew that Minji harbored feelings and concerns she couldn't verbalize. He was the villain of her love story. Then, she turned and left, leaving Jungkook and Taehyung alone. Jungkook sat beside Taehyung, his eyes scanning the photo card Minji had given him. It was a selfie of the two of them, their smiles bright and carefree. Taehyung's eyes met Jungkook's, his smile warm. Hey, Rue, we haven't taken a selfie yet. Jungkook's smile was soft, his eyes still shining with tears. Taehyung's gaze was gentle, his voice low. Maybe not here. Our first selfie should be in a better place. Jungkook's eyes lit up, his smile growing wider. He pulled out his cell phone, his fingers flying over the screen. Wherever you are, with you, I'm happy. Tainy, Jungkook said, his voice barely above a whisper. He leaned against Taehyung, his eyes locked on his. Taehyung's smile was radiant, his eyes shining with love. Their faces were inches apart as they clicked a selfie, their smiles bright and happy. As they stood inches apart, the tension between them was palpable. Taehyung's eyes locked onto Jungkook's, his lips parted, his breathing quickening as Taehyung's fingers brushed against his skin. Taehyung's lips trailed along Jungkook's neck, sending shivers down his spine. Jungkook's eyes fluttered closed, his head tilting back as Taehyung's fingers unbuttoned his shirt. Jungkook's hands wrapped around Taehyung's waist, pulling him closer as their bodies swayed together. Just as things were getting heated, Reginald walked in, his eyes narrowing at the scene before him. Taehyung, for crying out loud. You're still recovering from a gunshot wound. Don't be a bloody idiot. You can't handle getting physical right now. His gaze shifted to Jungkook, his expression stern. And you, Jungkook, have some bloody sense. Don't let him push himself too hard, or he'll end up back in the hospital. Or worse. Keep control of yourselves, you hear me? Even if you feel desperate to be together, just keep your bloody hands off each other for now. Reginald's voice was firm, his eyes blazing with a mix of concern and frustration. You're not thinking clearly, Taehyung, and you're not helping Jungkook. Just keep it together, okay? With that, he turned and left, leaving Jungkook and Taehyung staring at each other in shock. Jungkook's eyes were wide, his face pale. He's so blunt. Taehyung's smile was wry, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I think that's an understatement, Rue. Taehyung said. His smile was gentle, his eyes warm with love. That's my grandfather for you now. Jungkook stood at the airport gate, his eyes fixed on the departure board as if willing the words to change. Taehyung's hand wrapped around his, a gentle squeeze trying to offer comfort. Jungkook's chest heaved as he struggled to breathe, the weight of his sudden exile crushing him. He thought of his friends, his family, the familiar streets of Seoul, all being ripped away in an instant. Why like this, Tainy? Jungkook's voice cracked, his eyes welling up with tears. Why do I have to leave everything behind? Taehyung's grip on Jungkook's hand tightened, his eyes filled with empathy. We'll make a new home, Rue. Together. We'll find a way to make this work. You're not alone, I'm with you. He paused, his voice taking on a determined tone. And we'll make sure that Reginald's plan doesn't dictate our lives. We'll carve out our own path, together. Jungkook stood outside the lavatory, waiting for Taehyung as the plane soared through the skies. Alex approached him, a warm smile on his face. Hey Jungkook, we didn't catch up properly, Alex said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Jungkook smiled, feeling a sense of ease with Alex. But before they could continue their conversation, Taehyung's sharp voice cut through the air. Alex. Alex quickly removed his hand from Jungkook's shoulder, saying, Take rest, Nate. I'll catch up with you later. As Alex walked away, Taehyung lay down on the bed, his eyes fixed on Jungkook. Jungkook stared out the window, watching the clouds drift lazily by. But as soon as Taehyung called out his name, Jungkook was by his side. Rue, come here. Jungkook's heart skipped a beat as he sat down beside Taehyung. But before he could say anything, Taehyung pinned him down, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Tainy, please, Jungkook whispered, his voice laced with concern. You need to be careful. You're still recovering. But Taehyung just smiled, his lips brushing against Jungkook's ear. I'm fine, Rue. I just need you. Jungkook's fingers gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind Taehyung's ear, his eyes locking onto Tae's. Taehyung's eyes sparkled with mischief as he leaned in closer, his face inches from Jungkook's, his breath dancing across Jungkook's skin. Jungkook's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, his voice low and husky. You should rest, Tainy, like grandfather said. Taehyung's lips curled into a sly smile as he leaned in closer, his nose grazing Jungkook's. Jungkook's eyes fluttered closed, his breath catching in his throat. Taehyung's warm breath caressed Jungkook's ear. But I don't want to rest, Rue. Taehyung whispered, his voice husky with desire. I want to play.